Good morning to everyone, and welcome to our newest 5G in Americas webinar. This event aims to enrich the discussions about sustainable regulation in an era of data communication. Today, our guest speaker is Philip Cross, telecom consultant and director of Bitech Caribbean, who works in the development of ICT solutions to assist governments, regulators, and operators globally. Mr. Philip Cross is a telecommunication engineer with over 45 years of experience in the sector. He holds a Bachelor in Science degree in Electronic and Telecommunications Engineering from the University of East London, UK. He worked at the Post and Telegraph Department, Kingston, Jamaica, from 1977 to 1985, at least 5 years as Chief Telecommunications Engineer. He was responsible for government telecommunications matters, including spectrum management, telecommunications development, and broadcasting. He led Jamaica's delegation to many international and regional conferences. Mr. Cross started working for the ITU in 1985 and became ITU's Caribbean representative in 1990s, a position he held until his departure in 2011. He developed the ITU policy in the Caribbean and provides technical assistance to Caribbean countries in a range of issues, include ITU membership, privatization, spectrum management, broadband development, and ICT regulation. He developed the concept of the Caribbean Hippie Car project, which stands for enhancing competitiveness in the Caribbean through the harmonization of ICT policies, regulation, and regulatory procedures. He worked with Caribbean ICT stakeholders and took part in activities related to the Millennium Development Goals, Small Island Development in States, and the World Summit on the Information Society, among others. After his retirement, Mr. Cross has remained fully involved in the telecommunications ICT sector, providing consultancy services to governments and companies. He has participated in ITU conference and prepared the strategic plan for the Commonwealth Telecommunications Organization, CTO, and later became the CTO advisor for the Americas region. He also undertook assignments for the Caribbean Telecommunications Union and the Caribbean Association of National Telecommunications Organization. A quick disclaimer. I would like to remind you that the opinions expressed in the following session are the responsibility of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the official position of 5G in Americas or any of its members. This webinar will be recorded and will be made available later on the 5G in Americas Kala YouTube channel. The link will be sent by email shortly. Lastly, the session will be moderated by Jose Otero, Vice President of 5G in Americas for Latin America and the Caribbean, who is going to give us a brief introduction to today's topic. Mr. Otero, please take the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ludmila, and it's an honor and pleasure to have here today Felix Cross, who is one of the most notable individuals in terms of Caribbean telecommunications. Uh, as Ludmila mentioned, he was the ITU representative for the Caribbean during the era of liberalization process that, if we all remember, in the non-Spanish speaking Caribbean started back in 2001 when no one believed in the Caribbean, and then the success of what happened in Jamaica at the time led for the ongoing liberalization of almost every single other market in the Caribbean during that first decade of this century. Uh, During that time, he was quite busy advising different government and ensuring that everybody understood what were the Millennium Development Goals, and also try to work as a liaison between the private sector and the public sector in, in order to ensure that development was one of the main goals in the agenda of the different governments. He is here today as part of 5G America's objective of give voice to many of those knowledgeable people that we usually don't hear from them at regional event, especially when they are from the Caribbean and outside the Caribbean, we don't hear about them. So what we are trying to do is ensure that everybody knows what is happening in the Caribbean, what the dynamics of the Caribbeans are, especially for the non-Spanish speaking market, because it's a extremely diverse market. There are more markets in the Caribbean than in the rest of Latin America or the Americas combined. So it's my pleasure today to give you the floor to you, Philip. Take it away.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Ludmila. Good morning, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure to be here with you today to talk about this important subject. As you heard, I am representing Bytech, and Bytech is a small software company out of the UK, registered in Dubai, and they develop various types of software. Now, today I'm going to talk about sustainable regulation. So, sustainable regulation, what is it? And we really don't know exactly what it is, but I can tell you some of the things that are included. One, the operator provides service that satisfies the needs of all the stakeholders and is also allowed to make a profit. After all, they invest their money, they're going to need to make some money on it. Two, regulators regulate fairly, and they ensure that the needs of governments and consumers get the attention of the operators. I remember in the early days of regulation, there were regulators who actually said to me that it was their turn to get back at the operators for all the damage they did over time. And I said, no, guys, you can't operate in that way. You have to be fair. And as a matter of fact, I had a friend who was a regulator, and he said to me once that, he said, Philip, everybody hates me. I must be doing something right. So that was his take on that. The third part of it is that customers receive value for their money and are able to undertake their activities satisfactorily. D, and this is one of the really critical parts, universal service funds should be sufficient to ensure that coverage is extended to all areas of countries. The unserved, the underserved, the unreachable, we have to try and reach them. The problem is USF, for the time being, is obtained from voice traffic. And with voice traffic tending to zero and data traffic tending to infinity, there's a problem. So it means the dynamics have to be changed right there in terms of the Universal Service Fund. I understand also that there are a few countries who still do not have a universal service regime in place. And that is really critical. And I usually compare that by saying, look, if you look at, say, the United States, biggest, most powerful country when it comes to telecoms, they do have a universal service fund, which has a budget of like $5 to $8 billion annually. So smaller countries, don't you think we should have one? E, the digital borders should be protected. Now, what are we talking about, digital borders? A lot of persons think that you get into a country, the telecommunications means of getting into a country are through the operators and the links that the operators provide. Yes, that is one way of getting in. And right now, the operators have a lot of illegal operators piggybacking on their systems. But in addition to that, we have satellite technology. Satellite dishes are in your countries, and they're doing things that many people do not know. So that is one way of getting past the digital border. We know of cases where adjacent countries have operators using microwaves and various other technologies getting illegally from one country to the other and providing service and making a profit illegally. But because those don't follow the normal trend of the operators, they tend to be forgotten, but they're really important. And as we go along, I guess we will see a bit more of that. Then we have here the Bytech topology discovery system, and that is one system that can be used in dealing with some of these issues. And we'll talk about that a little more. Now, I like to start also right at the top of things. Why are we talking sustainable? Now, in 2015, in the point one here, at the United Nations, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted. Information and communication technologies are playing a major role in achieving those goals. And the agenda of the Sustainable Development Agenda is a global roadmap for ending poverty, tackling inequalities, dealing with the environment, gender equality, you name it, everything, education, health, they're all covered by there. So they're saying, let's get a sustainable agenda going. Last year, the ITU Global Symposium for Regulators was held in Egypt, and they had some interesting statements, which I thought I'd point out here. A, our focus here is on novel, innovative, groundbreaking, evidence-based approaches and tools to support a meaningful and sustainable digital future for all people everywhere. So you're talking about novel, innovative. And I guess you could take that to mean what is there is not working as well as it should. B, universal service funding. Policymakers and regulators can employ universal service financing mechanisms to address the needs of rural, unserved, and underserved areas and populations in vulnerable situations. We already said universal service funding isn't a problem in many countries. So how can we be sustainable if the universal service funding is not sustained? C, data and benchmarks. Regulators need the resources and capacity to collect relevant data to support their decisions in an open and transparent manner and to establish metrics and benchmarks to measure regulatory compliance and progress towards achieving connectivity targets and policy goals. This also suggests that it's not as easy as we would think to get all information is needed. This evidence collected helps inform and more appropriately target regulatory interventions, thus enhancing the effectiveness of the regulator. So, what has changed? We have these over-the-top operators, and they have become a major influencer. Now, through all the studies and all by the ITU, I believe the World Bank and many others too, the customers want to have OTTs. Therefore, they are going to be there, they're here for the long haul. Voice traffic has dropped significantly, and I'll show you the evidence as we go along. That has dropped significantly, and there's not a single country that relies on USF from voice that is not feeling the pinch. Data traffic has increased significantly, but operators are not taking advantage of that as yet to recover their universal service fund. And the suggestion is that we use universal service, we use data traffic to get back the USF that's being lost. Number 4, it says that the USF have fallen significantly due to the fall in voice traffic and the rise of data. So one is going to 0, one is going to infinity. The consumers want OTTs, and that is driving up the need for data. So the operators provide that capacity for them. In some cases, you find, especially in the Caribbean, you find operators are now offering data packages. And as far as I'm aware, the governments make very little from those. So all stakeholders are concerned. And we see that there are discussions to resolve disagreements between the OTTs and the operators. Now, as you're probably aware, different regions of the world have been negotiating with OTT providers so that they can get some sort of payment for using their networks. I mean, if you look at something like WhatsApp, they make probably $1 billion per year. They have no networks, so they use the operators' network. And operators are saying, let us do something about that. Different regions have had different successes, but this is a long story, and it's not an issue that I would delve into too quickly, because it goes back a long way. In 2012, the ITU had its World Conference on International Telecommunications, and for those who are familiar with it, the United States did not sign that. Part of the reason was the government did not feel that their operators should be paying any money to network providers in order to continue with their OTT business. Nevertheless, it is something that needs to be discussed, and I know Caribbean operators are up in arms about it, and they're looking at ways of dealing with this. Okay. Now, here are a couple of statements. It concerns Jamaica. They concern Jamaica. The CEO of the Universal Service Fund in Jamaica said that the organization's funding source is steadily declining as more persons use the voice over internet protocol, VoIP systems, instead of the traditional telephone service. The USF's dilemma first came to the fore 6 years ago. So that was in 2023. He said this, when it was discovered that more Jamaicans in the diaspora were using the internet to communicate with family and friends instead of making fixed and mobile telephone calls. I mean, if the relatives are getting away with paying nothing to call home, then you can't blame them. That's the way to go. In March 2020, Technology Minister Favor Williams in Jamaica again said that the sustainability of the Universal Service Fund is concerning as its revenues remain on a downward trajectory due to the predominant use of data over voice calls. She says the USS is therefore finding it more difficult to fulfill its mandate of rolling out Wi-Fi community access points across the island. And when you look at Jamaica, how they have been rolling out libraries, communities, everywhere you go, they're rolling out. So now they have to sort of pull back a little bit because they are constrained. Now, this is just a quick reminder that of the voice situation, which was resolved back in 1997. And here, and leading up to another problem that we faced, it was agreed that the operators in the US would pay operators in other countries 15 cents per minute for the upper income countries, 19 cents for the middle income, upper middle income, 19 cents for the lower middle income, and 23 cents per minute for the low income. And that was paid to Haiti. I know, I'm not sure if it's the same for Nicaragua. Now, if you look at the dynamics here, if you take a company like, say, let's say AT&T, who wants to get traffic into Jamaica, it can only pay 19 cents per minute. But then you have persons in the US who would go to AT&T and say, look, we can get the traffic for you into Jamaica at 15 cents per minute. AT&T would say, fine, take it. So AT&T makes that extra 2 cents there. These guys now would find various means, many of them illegal, of getting that traffic into the countries concerned. In the US, it's not illegal. So there's quite, there's several different arguments here, because the FCC will say to you, to their operators, whatever you do in another country should be in accordance with their laws. But then these guys now who are telling AT&T, we can do this for you. We can get in cheaper than you can. AT&T is quite happy. And these guys will get that traffic there. And they would set up SIM boxes and they would do various means. And I'm assuming that many of you know about the SIM boxes where an illegal operator would buy SIM boxes from an operator in the country concerned. And they would use this to direct traffic from the US to that SIM box. And then they pay a local call to deliver those messages to the persons concerned. In the case of Haiti, they were getting 23 cents, but many years ago, the president of Haiti added 5 cents. He asked for another 5 cents, and they were getting, not per minute, but per call. And they were using that for their education purposes. Jamaica had also added an extra 2 cents, and they were using that for the universal service plans as well. So there are different ways of looking at it. Okay, we're going back to data because this is where it's at. And now that we're moving into 5G, 5G is data centric. So there'll be more and more data operations. And wherever 5G is being rolled out, you see many more antennas needed. But this is just to give you a quick idea of what's going on. Now, if I'd asked any of you before, which country had the cheapest data rate in the Caribbean, I'm sure you would not say Haiti. But Haiti is the one, 22 cents per minute. And there are many questions here to be answered in this little table. If you look between St. Vincent, Dominica, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, and Grenada, these are 5 countries in ECTEL. And they have an economic union. They have a lot of agreements, financial unions. But yet, the data rate is there's almost 80 cents different between those countries. So the question is why? And at some stage, the regulators probably need to come together and find out why that is so. And then we're seeing Barbados, Belize, Antigua, Bahamas with fairly high data rates. And by the way, the source of this data is cable.co.uk. In Central America, Nicaragua, again, one of the lower economies in the region, has 55 cents, up to Mexico with $2. So this is the sort of rate per gigabyte of data. And of course, in South America, this is what the situation is now, where we have Colombia 20, Uruguay 28, Brazil at 40. So you see a big difference. And what we're unable to explain is, why is it that there are all these differences? In some cases, in these different regions, we have the same operators using pretty much the same technology under the same conditions. Why are the data rates so different? So this is a question that I would leave for the regulators. In the US and Canada, and of course, we have to put them off to the side because things are operated a little differently in those countries. In the US, for example, it's like some 70 million consumers only have choice of one. And things operate quite differently here. It is said that the competition is not enough because quite often you have 2 big operators and several others. But depending on where you're living, you may not have much of a choice. And if you look at, say, the US, as far as voice is concerned, now I am an AT&T subscriber. And if I make a call, a landline call, mobile call to Jamaica directly, it's going to cost me more than $3 per minute. To get out of that, I pay AT&T an extra $15 per month to make my calls to the Caribbean, and then they'll charge me 22 cents per minute. So the dynamics are quite different here. So it's very difficult to compare. So I just put that as information. We can't really compare, but that's the state of play here. Okay, so how are we going to start dealing with some of these issues? Number one, we can do topology surveys to get a clear picture of a situation. What I'm saying by that is, for example, and I'm sure there are other people with this sort of software that BITEC came up with, we do a topology mapping of a country. And a few countries have asked us to do this. So the topology will give you an idea of the data routes into the country, of the operators in the country. And we do that by pinging IP addresses in different countries from at least 6 different points globally. And by analyzing the information that we get back, you can form a picture of what is happening in the country. And the preliminary part of that can be done remotely. Second here, the digital borders again. One must start giving more consideration to the digital borders. There's protection for the physical borders, for various reasons, for drug smugglers, for illegal persons and illegal activities, but the digital borders are there. I know for a fact of places where the digital borders were easily penetrated. One guy went to the country next door, and these are not all illegal operators, let's say. One guy would go to another country and he would set up his system, and he goes straight in, undetected, and undertake whatever activities he wants to undertake. Third point is we should ensure that only licensed operators can conduct business. That is a difficult one, but later on we will see something which links into this. Again, the software that we're working on can look at an operator's network, can identify illegal operators. It can identify all the operators that are in a particular country. Of course, it's easier for the smaller countries, but you can quite often sit in an operator's network and you can see all that is going on. Now, as a small private company, we can only find information. So, and we can only operate courtesy of the government and the regulators. And when they ask us to do something, okay, we're having a look, and this is what we've found here. You go and decide what you want to do. In other words, technically, you could block some of these operators. But is that what the operators want to do? The regulators want to do? Perhaps not, because the regulator could say, well, look, guys, we can see you quite clearly, and we can see what you're doing. So we can give you an opportunity to get yourself a license, and you can operate and help to maintain. You pay for your USF, you pay whatever taxes should be paid, and you'll be allowed to operate. And quite often, that is a good way. Or as Five says, they can be removed from the carrier's networks. But as I just said, that would not necessarily be the first instance. But once these people are found out, then some action may need to be taken. Number 6, to ensure that IP addresses are registered. What we found, and this 6 ties in with 7. When you look at the topology in a lot of countries, you find IP addresses not commensurate with the amount of devices in operation in the country. So Aaron, and I'm assuming we know Aaron and Latnik, who are the guys in charge of IP addresses, IPv4 and 6. They are the ones who are our regional internet registries in this region. So when IP addresses are given out, quite often, we have the operators using what is called carrier grade NATing. So they would take one internet address and they would serve it, they would use it to serve several consumers. So many people would have the same address. Now, again, it's done in the US also, but in the US, the operators would have the equipment to translate that back to the real operator, the real consumer. But in most of the developing countries, you don't have that situation. So it looks like one IP address. So you're looking around, and we were a bit baffled at first that we have so many devices. Why are we not seeing more? Seeing more IP addresses. So they're not showing up. No, I'm saying if you compare that with what was the caller line identification, that's for voice traffic, where when we have traffic being passed to some of these operators, which I mentioned before, they would strip some of the information from those phone calls. So you wouldn't have like your caller line identification. They would do a whole lot of things, making it easier to transmit by VoIP. Here now we have the carrier grade NATing, and that is helping, is being used in the transition from IPv4 to IPv6. Now IPv4 is now exhausted, and there's a transition to IPv6, which I don't think is backwards compatible. But that is an issue there, and it's an issue for regulators to take up. And what we're saying here is regulators need to become more familiar with data communications. We are in a data era. And a lot of regulators I spoke to, they were concentrating a lot on the voice aspect. Now the voice is going away, and the regulators could very well come to a situation where they say, well, we no longer want USF from voice. We're going to get it from data. And as a matter of fact, we won't even tax voice. I'm not saying that's what you should do, but I'm saying that is a possible solution. So by using a topology survey, you can see a lot of what is going on. Okay, so that the system that I'm talking about is designed to identify all routes into and out of a country, identify fraud on the operator's network. It can be used to measure traffic volumes, data, and voice. Now, some operators are telling me that, well, we never know what is coming in because we don't know how to verify the numbers that an operator might give us. And so there's a concern there. But if you believe that that is correct, then that can be done. But it can be measured. So in the first instance, we use remote surveys. So the guys stay in Europe and the Middle East, and they do their pinging, and they come back and say, well, this is what we have found here. And if necessary, a more definitive situation can be arrived at. Now, this is from a country which asked us to conduct one of these remote topology surveys as a proof of concept. As it is, I just can't remember the name of the country, so we just call them X. So we asked them, well, what do you have in your country? What's the system? They said, well, okay, we have 1, 2, 3 incumbent carriers, and this is how they move their traffic. 1, utilizing C cable links, backhaul to central headquarters site in a separate country with a backup circuit via microwave to a third country. So there are all sorts of ways. ICT2, utilizing C cables for international traffic. IC3, utilizing C cable links and via microwave to a third country to send traffic to the US for further routing. Okay. So this is what is known. This is what the operator has. So this is the situation. They said, fine, we will do a remote survey and we will see what is there. Okay. So after the remote survey, this is what we found. So incumbent 1, 2, 3, and their backup networks, they're all there. All of these are operators that the regulator does not know about. So there were 16 entities found advertising network data in that country. This included data services suppliers, 3 companies that were found to be non-operational or should have been, 2 that are listed behind the advertised carriers, and 11 with no connections on relationship to country X. Now, the interesting finding is the number of entities that are using IP addresses that are not allocated to country X by the recognized regional registry, but rather using others, including RIPE out of Europe. And they're both foreign and local entities across sectors such as carriers, secure networking, education, banking. And here is an important point. In addition to this, is low orbit ISP present in country X as both an Earth station and client distribution. What that means? Well, here we're seeing that a bank could get a low Earth orbit satellite link, 300, 400 megabytes per second. With that, you can serve a small village with the internet. You can serve your entire company. Now, the government might give you permission to do that, and that's fine. Or in education. What is happening now, we have a lot more Earth stations going in, and they are being negotiated, and they're receiving licenses all over, not only the Caribbean, all over the world. This is happening. So when these guys, when you have an individual with one of these licenses, you know that they have a license to operate. So you know they're getting it from their LEO, but you don't know what's at the end of that terminal. At the end there, you could have a SIM bank. You could have an entire village being served, a commercial activity. You don't know what could be there. So this is again part of the whole digital border. So one has to look towards that. So if you are going to grant a license to someone who, for example, says, well, I want to get a Starlink service, should you attach a condition? And here I'm just asking the question, I'm not the regulator. Should you say, well, not to be used for commercial purposes or something? And while at Cantor last week, I was talking to a minister, and this is one of the problems she said they were facing, because they were having discussions about these satellite terminals and not sure where this is going to go and how one should deal with it. So it is demanding a lot more attention, and it's something for the regulators to look at. Now, as I come close to my presentation, I say I need to report these two incidents here. April and May of 2024, Thai security forces, based on tips received, raided a number of locations in Thailand where they confiscated a number of items intended for illegal communications, including scam calls and illegal call centers. Equipment included SIM boxes, thousands of SIM cards, and satellite equipment. And this, of course, shows the need for countries to protect their digital borders and to prevent illegal operators from operating in their space. So the Thai government got a tip. Many governments do not get that tip. And maybe some of you have heard about some of the activities in the Asian region close to Thailand, and it's quite significant. But having gotten this particular one, they were able to go in and arrest people, stop the operations, etc. The second incident, and this one concerns Haiti. And on January 3rd, 2023, the Irish Times reported that Digicel had won a bitter 8-year battle with a US rival is accused of fraud. Digicel Haiti, one of its most, and this is quoting from the Irish Times, Digicel Haiti, one of its most lucrative units, has been awarded more than $10 million in damages against Oregon company UPM Technology and its chief executive, Bruce Tran. Digicel accused UPM of so-called bypass fraud, where one telco uses technology to override the systems of another to essentially resell its calls on the cheap. Now, for this particular thing, and as we said, it's public knowledge, this part of it, Well, what is not public knowledge is that at the time, Biotech had done was doing some monitoring for Haiti and came across this particular thing. Now, quite often when we find when these illegal operators pop up, and I know operators do find them from time to time, and quite often when they're found out, they simply run away, salvage whatever they can, and go away to do business elsewhere. In this case, it didn't happen. And the operator said they had a right to be able to do that. So that is where, and Digicel shut them down and sued them. These guys countersued Digicel. So the matter was, it took 8 years. I was in the Oregon court. And I guess a couple of years before the final case, I have to confess also that the lawyers that were dealing with it for Digicel asked me to work with them and be their expert witness in dealing with the information that was there. So eventually that information was put to the courts, and Digicel won the settlement. So that's the end of that case. Doesn't mean that's the end of those illegal activities in Haiti or in Jamaica or in Barbados or in Colombia, Brazil. They're there still. So this is going to be a problem for this type of thing. And of course, even in this case, the lawyers for the company, they figure that they had a right to do this. So that was this misconception that they had a right to go to a country, establish a thing, establish their networks, and make money, and without being regulated by anyone. And that is not the case. So those two are just showing that, hey, we do have some serious things happening there. And I think that is the last slide that I have. And these are my contacts here. So anybody wants to reach me. So right now, if there is anything I can try to clarify, then please let me know.
Thank you, Philip, for your comprehensive presentation in terms of what are some of the dynamics in the Caribbean. First, talking about universal service funds, and then talking about the digital border, which is something extremely important when we are looking into the region, especially when we have some markets that are extremely close, especially in the Lesser Antilles. Does anyone has a question? If you have a question, just raise your hand, and I'll basically will enable your audio, or you just can write it down in the chat area.